So we're on week 5 of the course on value capture and growth.
And this is actually the final week. So congratulations to making it so far. It's only a few more segments and you're done with the whole MOOC. As we said, you're not going to focus on the most essential elements. And by now you've seen that we actually focus only on the essential elements.
Thanks for staying with us so far.
Thanks for staying with us. And so far what we have covered is in week 2, opportunity identification. You know, the first baby steps that you do as an entrepreneur, identify an opportunity, looking at how valuable it might be. The second point was in week 3 that we looked at entrepreneurial marketing, which is like getting the first sales, getting a healthy company, getting your company off the ground. And then week 4, we talked about finance.
Right. So with the raising and managing money, we talked a lot about the different types of investors. We talked about how much money you would need, making financial projections, looking for cash, keeping your cash management, and how to set up your crowdfunding.
But exactly, and you know, all of this is nice, but you need to capture also the value, you know, because if you do not capture the value of what you're creating, well, someone else is capturing the value. So in other words, you're working for someone else. So in this segment, we're going to talk about value capture, which actually means, well, there are some provisions, some strategies you can apply so that the value actually accrues to you and not to someone else. And that's what you have deserved because so far you have worked hard on this MOOC.
So one way of capturing value, or at least one of the beginning ways of capturing value, is to protect your idea. So in 5.1, what we're going to do is think about intellectual property, how it works, why do we have it, why do different countries have different rules about it, and what does it mean? So how can you protect your idea using different forms of intellectual property?
Exactly, and you might have different ideas, you know, so not every idea is ripe for a patent, but there are other ways, and we're going to talk about
We'll
this.
go through all those.
So copyrights are just one way of protecting your idea and trying to make sure that you can capture the value inherent in your technological innovation. There are others, and in segment 5.2 we talk about these other ways. It might be that you have complex production processes that other people cannot observe, or complex products that is not ready to be copied so easily by other actors, by your competition. And then there are still other elements that you might want to consider.
Right. I mean, there's also the issue of controlling key assets. You know, for example, if you need something to commercialize your technology and you have it in competitive supply, in other words, you have a choice among people who can do that for you, then of course you're generally speaking going to make more money from your invention. Or it could be that there's only a small number of companies that control what you need to do to commercialize. Maybe you're one of the key holders of one of those assets. And if you're not, then you're probably going to have to pay for it, and that's the point.
So there's some strategic analysis that has to go into understanding, well, how can you benefit the most by cooperating with different type of people, firms out there.
And even if it doesn't work out for you in that sense, you can still make money by moving on quickly. So we're going to discuss all of these different aspects during that segment.
So in terms of value capture, you shouldn't only think about your product and the strategic assets, etc. You also should think about the legal considerations more generally. So in 5.3, we talk about more broadly about legal considerations such as
product liability. For example, what do you do if your product can injure people?
Exactly.
Whether they're using it correctly or incorrectly. Or the kinds of corporate structure that you might want to have to limit your own personal liability so that you're not sued if something happens in the course of your doing business. So more generally, we'll talk also about engaging a lawyer and what are the sort of issues you need to talk about with your attorney.
We understand that you as an entrepreneur, you want to create things, create something cool and new. So this might not sound too exciting, but please listen to this segment because, you know, we've seen companies fail on that front. They did everything else right, but on that front, on the legal front, they lost out. So in that sense, they were dying because they couldn't protect themselves legally.
So the last segment in 5 is 5.4, pivoting and growth. Now, in order to capture value, you may need to change what you're doing, or you may need to grow bigger. So we're going to talk a lot about both of these things. First, we'll talk about pivoting. In other words, modifying some aspect of your business model to take advantage of a new opportunity or to shift what you're doing because what you're doing so far hasn't worked out perfectly.
And that actually links to what we discussed in the second week where we talked about opportunities and the multiple opportunities you might see, because that means, if you have a plan B, another opportunity in place, that's a well-made ground, a prepared ground for pivoting your venture to.
Perfect. And then we will also talk about growth. We'll talk about growth strategies for getting you off the ground, and we'll talk about the very happy problems that you might have when you get to be bigger, because there you need to make a kind of a shift toward a more managerially oriented company.
You might have to delegate to employees.
To delegate more. You need to give up a little bit of control, and those are very nice things that happen to you when your company is growing rapidly. So we will discuss also challenges of growth. So week 5 is really about extracting the value from your innovations.
So if you think about it, it's really like having the crown jewel in place, to pick it and say, hey, I'm not only creating something new, I'm already benefiting from it and create value for myself.
Right, so stay with us for week 5.